Well, on the evening of January 23, Burkina Faso saw what felt like a coup. Now, the government denied and called for calm. The next day saw the people's fears or expectations, as the case may be, happening in full glare. It was the nation's third coup d'etat in less than 8 years. It was yet another low point for the desire for democracy in Africa, especially in West Africa. But there's a tweak. Burkinabés, like Malians before them, do not consider this entirely wrong, as some groups of citizens trooped out to the streets in celebration of the military takeover. For them, enough was enough, and the commitment and loyalty of their government to France isn't welcome again. Across the West African sub-region, the age-long influence of the French is waning. With new partners sought, many Francophone countries are going past their colonial subservience, and their citizens are in support, no thanks to years of pillage and poverty. On Village Square Africa today, we take a look at the recent coups in the west of Africa, the waning influence of France, the support gotten by the mutinous military, and the proxy Cold War on the continent. Stay with us, I'm Sulaiman. In less than 2 years, West Africa has recorded 4 coups in 3 different countries. 2 coups in Mali, masterminded by the same officer, and 1 each in Guinea and Burkina Faso makes the region the most politically unstable in Africa and perhaps in the world. In Mali, the military blamed the poor governance and handling of the country for its intervention. When it chose civilians to rule, it hardly let it operate. Came back again for the second time, and this time permanently. Kone Assimi Goïta agreed to hold elections this year to have a new democratic government in Bamako, but changed his mind a few months to the elections. Mali's call for a 5-year transition plan didn't sit well with ECOWAS and the rest of the world. They kicked in anger and imposed sanctions on the country. Like Mali, Guinea also had a military leader take over, Kone Mamadi Doumbouya, and he led a group of soldiers to the seat of the Guinean government, held former President Alpha Condé, and took over the reins of power. Unlike Mali, it says it will hold an election soon. Burkina Faso is the latest of such grand military moves. Lieutenant Colonel Paul Henry Sandaogo Damiba also led a group of Burkinabe soldiers to government and held President Roch Kabore. They said the security of the country is in dire straits and needs new ideas. Coups, albeit better managed, have also been seen in Chad, but it didn't go without the death of a president. Outside West Africa, in Sudan, locals are still on the streets in protest against a military ruling in the country. Democracy is threatened in Africa, but is democracy helped the continent? Now, Fahiraman Kone, a senior researcher, Sahel Programme, Institute of Security Studies, joins me from Bamako in Mali, and Aziz Banse, a political analyst from Burkina Faso. Gentlemen, thank you for your time and thanks for joining us. Africa is watching. Good to see you all both. Let's start with you. The theme here is that a whole lot has happened. I'd like to start with you, Kone. Why have coups been very consistent in the West African sub-region?
I think you have just to recall one of the key points of this trend we are seeing. I cannot say that it's a new one, but the recent trend we are seeing in those coups, 4 coups in 2 years, is directly linked to the governance failure from the elected elite, the democratic elite. Since I can say 2000, we are seeing that a larger protest against failing to meet from people to meet the needs, the basic needs. So this is one side, but I think more recently the security situation, the jihadi insurgency, and most broadly the insecurity, including communal violences, came to be one of the first threat for the population, and the demand for protection increasingly become one of the key preoccupations of population. And then the government, civilian government, there doesn't really good enough to resolve those urgent problem. This security problem, I think, is one of the key points which can explain the rising coup for those last years.
Okay, I'll come back to you, Fahiraman, but let me come to you now, Aziz. Listening to Fahiraman, one of the key things a lot of people be asking is, even if all else is failing, does that mean that the only alternative is a military takeover? But quickly here, the people seem to also be in support. That's the most amazing thing, supporting the military takeover in these countries. What are we not getting here, Kone, Aziz?
Well, in fact, well, let me say that, well, people are, most of them they are happy about what is concerning the country. For the case of Burkina Faso here, and well, let's say that the elected chairman does not make the affair of the people, and we can witness the increasing of terrorism in the country. Also, corruption is taking a big side. The combination of all this make people, very, angry about the ruling. The former ruling, government. Well, so when the military took the power, well, we can say we saw a kind of joyful moment for the people, because, well, for them there is a beginning of hope. They can still hope that things will change in a certain way. Well, they needed a certain change, but unfortunately, the democratic, regime could not provide them with the real change they need. That's why, well, there have been, the coup has been collapsed all over the country.
Let's come back to you, Fahiraman. You were the first to have mentioned security. And now Aziz is also talking about security. Now it looks like something very important for us to stay on. How does the security challenge in the Sahel affect the stability of governance in West Africa?
Aziz was saying that, there is this, I can say, people are just turning the back to the democratic system. But the key point is that they are seeing that elites, elected elites, maybe by fair and free election, but they cannot meet the basic needs on governance. And security, this last year in the Sahelian region, on the backdrop of jihadist insurgency, become one of the key preoccupations for people. And when you see the trend, the jihadi insurgency has begun in Mali since 2012, and there was nothing really which has been done by national authorities, nor by the international troops in the country. So more and more investment, financial investment are making in the security apparatus in the security, but with no result. So that's become progressively crystallized the anger of the population. So the military are using the narrative of insecurity to justify the comeback to the power. You were asking if it is the only alternative. Is becoming the only alternative because there is no democratic, very, I can say, strong democracy institution which have been built for a long time. So now we're facing like a blockage when there is a kind of uncertainty to solve a big problem by the fact that there is lack of solid institution, it is easy that the military who are at the next door come back in the power.
Let me stay with you for a bit. Sorry to cut you here, Fahiraman. Let me stay with you before we go to Aziz. Still, this is for you. Listening to you, what readily comes to mind is that the military is an arm of the government. For instance, if you have a democracy, the president is a commander-in-chief, and if there is a failure somehow with regards to security, then the military is also a part of the problems. Don't you see that way?
Yeah, I think they're also the part of the problem, because what, the people, you were talking about a lack of popular coup. People, they don't have the capacity to see that also the military are also the part of the problem. Taking the specific case of Burkina Faso, for example, you see that the army, the budget which is invested in the army cannot be, there is no watchdog from civilian, for the parliamentary also and civil society could control, to make a citizen control of those investments in the army. So the army itself is corrupted sometimes. It's also corrupted. But people in this situation are seeing the threat like through a only military response. They don't imagine that it is more than a simply a sole military response. It's a broad one. It's an holistic response, and that's come to act as if only the military could come over to this severe crisis.
Well, I think that's a big point, because it looks like the people truly listening to you, Fahiraman, looks like some of these people are unaware of how the government operates. Let's quickly come to you, Aziz. Watching the coup, as the coup was announced in Burkina Faso, we saw some locals going out on the streets with Russian flags, not any other country's flag, Russian flags. What does this imply? And do you think this is what they need at the moment?
Yes, of course. And well, when the coup has been announced, well, as we said, well, people, went out with national flags, just yes. And it's the occasion for me to remind that the former president, Roch-Marc Christian Kabore, has been elected, let's say, he has started his next mandate, his second mandate, let's say less than, 12 months. So after this disillusion, well, for people, there was no solution, because, well, his ruling did not come over the terrorist attack, and let's say the corruption was also going on. So those people were fed up, and then there was no another alternative than what happened. So for them, once the Lieutenant Colonel Damiba, when they announced the coup, well, people were very happy, because formally they were very, very frustrated about the living condition of the Burkinabe people here.
Let me bring in Fahiraman Rahman. You're a senior researcher, at the Institute of Security Studies, and one big thing the sub-region is dealing with is security, Nigeria inclusive. Tell us how deep the problem of insecurity is within the West African region.
Yes, I think unfortunately what is happening in the capitals, the political unrest, are making people forgetting that there is a serious and a really badly security situation which is occurring in the Sahelian regions. I cannot give you exact figures, but let's take, for example, only the case of Burkina Faso. Since 2005, the country has been facing unprecedented crisis. it has left around almost 8,000 people dead in 6 years, according to the last figures. And there is frequent attacks targeting both civilian and government officials, starting with the armed force, which have suffered for losing over years. And most important, also, they are targeting teachers, civilians, administrators, judicial personnel. This link seriously to a very dramatic situation. But the conflict, the jihadist attacks are increased from Mali to Burkina Faso, now Niger. And the current trend is showing that there is a kind of spillover of the threat also in coastal states in Côte d'Ivoire, in Benin, Togo, and also Ghana. All those countries now are on the target of those jihadist groups. So while doing that, you have displacement people, you have all the kind of also old previous local conflicts where between, for example, herders and farmers, which are becoming now a kind of community conflict violence. Thus, all this insecurity is the fueling new conflicts. So if you take the security attacks, the community violences in a context where you have political crisis, you can see that we are in a serious, we have to worry sufficiently about the future of West Africa countries.
Yeah, and Aziz, I go back to that, that the footages we saw of people jubilating and also, raising Russian flags, making Africans ask the question if there's a sort of proxy Cold War on the continent, more like a new scramble for the continent among these governments in Europe.
Yes, of course. We can witness that. Well, there is a kind of Cold War between some Western countries, mainly France and Russia. So for many Burkinabe and so many also West African, yes, France, they do not play, a good role. They are not honest, with the way of fighting terrorism in the country. That's why, at the announcement of the coup, many people, when they were celebrating, at the same moment they were calling Russia for help, like the case Malian did. So they see in the turnover between, Burkina toward the Russian government as a kind of salvation, because France has shown its limit in our country. And there was also kind of cooperation between those two countries. But this cooperation for many Burkinabe are not, equal to equal. So even sometimes, there were attacks in Burkina Faso. That the drones of the France have seen, but they did not intervene. So this has frustrated many people, and they have tried to understand why. And also coming back to the soldiers in Burkina Faso, let me say that there were kind of two categories, because there were all soldiers, former soldiers, and new ones. The new one, the youth, they have taken the power over the elders one. They are called the Promotion 1992. It's a kind of gathering of young soldiers. They're trained together at Georges Namondo camps. They were there was kind of solidarity between them. And then they could not witness the worsening of the situation. That's why for many, they have decided to take the responsibility, between, let's say, in front of the history, if you can say.
Let me stay with you, Aziz, for a bit. Quickly, give us an update. What exactly is happening out there in Burkina Faso? Now, from the perspective of majority of citizens, are they Are they okay with what with the latest development?
Pardon?
You are in Burkina Faso, so we're trying to find out if you've been able to gauge the the pulse of the people. Are they, is the majority in agreement with the new government?
Yes, of course. We can say that there is a well, many people are, are happy, even though we do not have the number, you cannot estimate them. But through the showing of the joy, many of them are, are very happy. And even the former political parties, they make some declarations saying that, well, they do not say clearly that they approve the coup, but in fact they say that, okay, well, the coup is here, then we are aware of that, and then, well, some of them have already said that they are available to work with the militaries, if they ask it. So, Leslie, broadly speaking, well, we do not see a kind of dissatisfaction. Many of them are, well, there is not a real problem for the time being. Well, most of them are, are more or less satisfied with the ongoing rule. But there are some, our civil servant association, they warn the militaries, preventing them that whenever the ruling of the former president, Roch-Marc Christian Kabore, comes again, of course, they will go out and then claim for more equal right to the Burkinabe. And what they were expecting is that, well, if things do not change, that, well, there will be kind of protestation, there will be kind of claiming again.
Fahiraman, that coup in Burkina Faso is the third since 2014, and they had none after Blaise Compaoré took over power in 1987. Now, what's different in the approach to the military operations method used by Compaoré and others? Did you think that he had a better hold of the army?
Yes, Blaise Compaoré was really praised for his security system, which was considered one of the best security system since Burkina Faso gets independence. But it has built units which were, I can say, tailored to his power, concretely tailored to his power, who was at the same time doing good job in terms of preventing external threats, but at the same time, which was not, in fact, in the favor of the politicians, was to keep his regime. And this was really a problem. Yes, of course, if the RSP, which was one of the best security units of Blaise Compaoré, were still alive, perhaps it could have done something, but at the same time, it was not, I can say, a security apparatus which was in favor of the citizen. And this led me to one important point in Burkina Faso. Army are always been ever one of the key pillar of the governance in Burkina Faso. We are now experiencing I think it's the 6th or the 7th coup in Burkina Faso. And during 27 years, Blaise Compaoré, who was a military, ruled the country. And army was directly involved in political affairs. One of the reasons of this last coup might be linked to the sideline of the army when Kabore came after the insurgencies of 2014. We clearly, as Aziz said in some moment, that the civil society clearly demand of a sideline of military in the political affair. So it tried to sideline them, but at the same time, it did not build, I can say, a positive relation with the army. It has not reformed the army, it has not led a deep reform of the army so that there could be, I can say, an institution which can serve the republic, we can serve the citizen, and that's why I think was one of the failing of the security apparatus of Kabore.
What's your reading, Fahiraman? What's your reading or the reading of some of your colleagues at the Institute? Do you see these coups as a subtle, rejection of the French forces, in West Africa?
I think at the first line, more than just the multiplication of these coups, the force reflect a deep political crisis, I think. A deep political, as I said at the beginning, there is a kind of disconnection between the popular expectation and also the corruption which undermine the governance. And then, yes, of course, the intervention of international troops, especially the French troops, has become as one of the big failure of this governance, because the French troops, which now we are around, it's reached 5,000 soldiers in Malian territory, but the security situation continuing to be worsening, and the impression that France and even ECOWAS still supporting the civilian regime, which failed to protect civilians, which failed to come with basic needs of people. This creates a deep, I can say, anti-French feeling, which is a latent, but now the insecurity situation is now putting it clearly at the face of everybody, saying that finally the French are the main actors which which are supporting the corrupted regime, but at the same time cannot come to solve this security problem. And to finish, you asked a question around the Russia intervention. I think there is a kind of geopolitics play in those crises, which is, I think, is not in favor of the Sahelian countries, which is not at all indifferent. They are, I can say, projecting in a international challenges that are beyond the needs of the population. Population needs good governance, access to employment, access to fair justice system, and access to protection. But now, by internationalizing this crisis and taking over the challenges between Russia and also Western country, now the situation is becoming more and more complex, which for a crisis which was already complex during a long time.
Fahiraman and Aziz, we'll take a moment. When we'll come back, we'll be looking at the regional bloc, ECOWAS, in the mix of all of these and the future of the subcontinent. Well, if you just joined us, you're welcome. You're watching Village Square Africa here on New Central Television, broadcasting to 54 African countries. And now, You know, currently there are at least 13 foreign militaries in Africa, helping different countries to tackle security challenges. This is believed to keep the African countries at their mercy. Now, with security challenges tearing down the Sahel, different foreign forces are intervening, but there are risks of pillage of resources. This also means certain governments have grown lazier to finding solutions to the challenges and further helping a deepening level of poverty. ECOWAS, as it stands, may need to revisit its policies in countries and have conversations with the people affected, as the assumption is that the body hardly protects the people's desires and well-being. As you have with me, Fahiraman Kone and Aziz Banse. Now, good to see both of you gentlemen. Now, it's our home stretch. Let's start by asking you, Fahiraman, what you think of the moves and sanctions by the regional bloc, ECOWAS.
Well, so last sanction, for example, in Mali, which was one of the, I can say, the most severe sanction, economic sanction, has not been well received here in Mali, in Bamako. There was this big demonstration, protest. I can say it was 3 years ago, 3 weeks ago. And it was showing that there was a kind of social anger against the regional body. Regional body which people are seeing that the regional body have a kind of behavior which is not fair. The insistence on the Mali rapid return to the constitutional order was contrasting with the silence of the unconstitutional manipulation, for example, in Côte d'Ivoire and also in Guinea. So they see that there is a kind of double game that the regional body is playing. And at the same time, instead of being a kind of support for the population, there is sanction, and those sanctions are not well received here in Mali. So, but this questioning the management mechanism that ECOWAS is now using to the current crisis. I think there is a big evolution, transformation of political imaginaries in the population that puts them in a situation to react and to influence also political agenda. And it seems to me that ECOWAS has not, at the moment, take the profound transformation of this situation to adapt its new mechanism of conflict management or crisis management on the West Africa, in West Africa.
Fahiraman, let me stay with you a bit here. And, you know, still about ECOWAS, some have argued or criticized the bloc that it doesn't do anything to help the people. But what it does is just to help the leaders.
Yeah, this is one critic. People say that is not a CDR for people, is a CDR for, I can say, is like a union for president. This is one of the main critics, in fact. But I think the more profound problem of CDR is that CDAO, the regional body, ECOWAS, the regional body, has not made a transformation in the way of seeing the conflict. The main instrument, the main tools used was for the conflict in the early 1990s when you were internal conflict, rebellion, and those, or when there was those coups in the democratic context. But now the situation has profoundly changed. People are now more and more influencing political agenda, as I said. And secondly, I think also the the posture of CEDEAO by intervening like firemen instead of preventing the situation. When there is hurling warning about ill governance, bad governance, there is no real action which is led by CEDEAO to prevent those situations to become worse. And this, I think, is one of the main problems of ECOWAS.
Well, Aziz, help us here. You've been studying, the dynamics of political development in West Africa. Quickly here, do you think leaders are making the people see the need for an alternative to democracy?
Pardon? Sorry?
Do you think, looking at what is happening on the continent, a lot of citizens, in these countries are already thinking that democracy may not give them, what they so desire as a people?
Yes, of course. Some of them are thinking that. And then as democracy in our country, has shown its limits through, I can say, bad governance, corruption. Well, so for them, it cannot work for something that it cannot work. And we have some good example of, let's say, of non-democratic country in Africa where it works. You can say the case of Rwanda, which is today seen as an example. We can take the example of some also African countries where things well, even though they are not democratic. So people now, for them, democracy, well, if is not the real solution for them, what is most important for them, and whatever the regime, is to fight against bad governance, corruption, and also insecurity problem. And for the case of Burkina Faso, we can say that the top problem of the country is, let's say, the insecurity problem, which has made more than 1,500,000 international displaced persons, 3,000 schools which are closed. Well, so if an exceptional regime will come and make them solve their problem, they don't think any problem for that. Even though sometimes we have witnessed democracy before the time of Blaise Compaoré. He has organized election, but election in our country, well, we can see that there are many corruption is involved. People vote for their personal interest from their I can say
Aziz, let me come in here. Sorry to cut you. I was actually coming there. Now now that you're there already, let's drop this in. In a democracy, there's usually an election. You have an opportunity to change a government if you so will. If you think that the government isn't performing, an election will come and the people will pull together and vote out that government. Do you think that these countries, Burkina Faso inclusive, haven't done enough to sensitize the people so that the people can understand that in a democracy, there is a way or a system whereby you can actually ease off a leader and get another administration on board?
Yes, of course. This is the idea. This is the most. This is what we want the most. But the reality is still there. People, well, if we sensitize them about the ruling of democracy, the ups and downs of democracy, what is democracy, etc., the benefit of democracy. But the problem is still there. People, well, the maturity for democratic, well, is still on the way. It's not for the time being. Even there is one opponent in Burkina Faso. He said that if one day he's on power, will make, to vote, he proposed a kind of degree, because people vote for those who have money, and this is unfortunately the case in our countries. The one which is rich and then can get the power. They don't care about what the idea and, well, the ideology. This is unfortunately the case. So for the time being, well, the alternative they propose is, let's say, a kind of coup. And we have witnessed it before with Thomas Sankara. He was not elected democratically, but he has done a lot for this country and also for Africa.
Fahiraman, help us here. How can future coups be averted? Can it ever be?
We cannot say that it's the coup we are finishing in Africa. What the trend we are seeing that is very worrying, because the root causes, as we said, is straightly linked to governance, to bad governance, and also to the failing of the current regime to meet basic need from people. And when you see also this kind of bad governance, ill governance is present in many African countries. And I think for me, the problem, yes, people are turning back to democratic system. It's not the democratic system itself that they want to turn the back. Is that this system is not making the politician better. They're now aware that elections are corrupted. The electoral system, the electoral system, when there are elections, those who have most money, we have can corrupt the system. If they can turn the rules to their favor, they can change the system. People are aware about that. That's why there is a kind of rejection of the democracy. They are focusing on governance. And unfortunately, they think also that alternative to democracy could be a strong, personalized leadership, which is not, for me, the solution. Because we have already experienced this many times in Africa, in many countries. And the example of Blaise Compaoré was one of the best examples. Also, the example in Mali of Moussa Traoré was also a good example. They did not meet also the people expectation in terms of development, in terms of also protection. So we have to be very careful about what is happening, what is now becoming like a fad, like something which is famous, people seeing that the alternative in military regimes. And I'm not sure, as I said, that the military regimes could solve this insecurity we are seeing. The jihadist insecurity is very enrooted in the communities. So the solution is holistic. It's not only military, it's also development. Most importantly, is political also dialogue. So could the military be able to resolve, to have all this holistic approach? There is a big question, and I'm not sure that is also we are moving in a good trend.
You know, Fahiraman, let me stay with you a bit here. Trying to make sense of what we've seen so far, one wonders why, what actually differentiates the people of Sudan from the locals in Burkina Faso and Mali, because all three reacted to these coups in their countries differently.
Yes, in Burkina, they did not act differently. When you see what's happened in the first coup in Mali was after a popular protest, a regular popular protest, which led, and finally the military came and take easily the power because there was this social anger already existing. That was also the same thing in Sudan earlier, when before Béchir was ousted. But now, when of course, when you're seeing what's happening now in Sudan, we must also take lesson of that, saying that the military regime is not the best one. We could make a serious comeback to the 70s or 80s, when you have those bloody dictatorship. So for me, we must really pay attention about what is happening, not going, making a praise of the military regimes like this. Now we are witnessing also in Bamako a kind of closure of the democratic space. People who have different opinion of what's happening cannot protest. They cannot express. There was one professor, university professor, who make a kind of critiques of the position of the junta linked to the sanction, but it has been imprisoned. So it means that it's a worrying situation too.
Well, Aziz, there are insinuations that these coups have been masterminded by French-trained soldiers, and they don't seem impressed with their subservience to France. So isn't it high time the French left these countries?
This question is complex, but I think it's high time for them to review, what they have signed. Yeah, to review what they have signed. If not, it said that the partnership is not equal. Some of the people call them to leave the country because they cannot see any results of the intervention in the country. But however, we can see that there are some results, even though they are not too high. Even today or yesterday, the French soldiers in Burkina Faso together, they come across 60 jihadists. So, for me, it's high time for them to review what they have signed in order to be more efficient.
Yeah.
Fahiraman, you were going to say something. Go ahead, Fahiraman.
Yes. I think what is in play here is less than the French troop intervention than the attitude of France itself. As is well speak about this partnership, which is not all the time in favor of African states. And there is a kind of returning of colonialism in the way of acting with with the countries. So the French intervention, yes, it comes with some results. We cannot deny that, for example, in Mali, when the insurgency in 2012 began, the French troops did a great job. And there was all praise here in Mali. But progressively, in the way of operating of those troops, or the way of operating of the French state, it's become problematic. Sometimes there is a kind of turn back to this colonial attitude, which is not really appreciated. And for me, it is also the time that the West African states take their responsibility, because this crisis, this jihadist crisis, this political crisis coming everywhere, and also community violence, which is worsening the situation, threatening at first our economies, threatening African states at first. So it's our responsibility to be at the first line. Not waiting from Russia or from France or other countries to come and help us. They mustn't be at the first line. We have to take our security sovereignty, but with a joint effort. I know that there is inside Sahel this G5 joint task force, but which is not operational. It's a good idea, but because no African state, African Union, and also CEDEAO, they did not put money in the basket. So that's why the international troops, the countries, are now at the first line of this fighting. And this colonial attitude can persist because we don't want to take our responsibility to be at the first line to fight our own problem.
Fahiraman, you know, allow me to throw this in. There is this African saying that you don't cut with your teeth the beef that is forbidden in your culture. So how is it that these African leaders come in through, the army, but ultimately switch to a democracy and stay put in power as, civilian presidents?
Yeah. And this is something which is really, that when you see what's happening, for example, here in Mali, I think there is a kind of, people want to play on what's happening. We portray all those anger, all those disillusion through against the democratic system. They want to use this as a pretext, and I don't know how to explain it, but I think that there is this problem. When you see all the states here in most of the states in West Africa, you take Mali, you take Burkina Faso, and then Niger. It's more recently that you have civilian at the head of Niger, but also Guinea. All the leaders were, civilian, military, and then turned to civilian, but keep the military rule under the figure of democratic system. So this is a profound problem. It's a profound problem. As I said, it's a problem of institutional building. We have not built solid institutions which are going beyond, I can say, the using of violence as the way of coming to power or of a way of ruling.
Well, Fahiraman, Aziz, if my French was good, I think we would have interchanged this interview with French and English. But all I say now is merci beaucoup for being such nice company, Fahiraman and Aziz. Thank you very much.
Very sorry for our broken English. We were trying to...
No, it's my fault. And I'm saying that if only I'm good, I would have been able to do a little bit of French. And the only thing I can say is merci beaucoup.
Yes, okay, so but if I have an advice to give to my brother Nigerians, you have to speak French. Because
we have to.
You are border of French countries everywhere, surrounded by French countries. But
I'm going to take lessons from both of you, okay? After the show, my lessons start.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Fahiraman Kone and Aziz Banse.
Thank you so much.
All right. I hope we do this again. I'm Sulaiman. Bye-bye.